Some jobs pay in cash, others pay in ways you never see coming. Jake Sullivan wiped the sweat from his brow, his worn-out flannel sticking to his back as he crouched beside the rusted old tractor. It had been a long morning, but he wasn't about to quit. Not today. Not when he needed the money. His construction business had dried up, bills were piling up, and his 5-year-old son, Ethan, needed new shoes for school. So when he saw a flyer at the gas station, mechanic needed tractor repair paying cash, he didn't hesitate. He had no idea this one job was about to change everything. The farm was tucked in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by rolling fields that stretched far beyond what Jake could see. The moment he arrived, a woman stepped off the porch, wiping dirt from her hands. Emma Walker. She wasn't the old farmer Jake had expected. She was young, sharp-eyed, confident. Her jeans were dusty, her boots worn, but there was something about the way she carried herself, like someone who was used to being underestimated. "You the one who called?" Jake asked, glancing at the busted tractor. Emma nodded. "That depends. You know how to fix it?" Jake smirked. "Let's find out." The engine was a mess. Rust, leaks, a starter that had seen better days. No wonder it wouldn't run. As Jake worked, Emma stood nearby, watching. "You do this often?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Fix things? Yeah, been working with my hands my whole life." She nodded. "City boy or country?" Jake chuckled. "Somewhere in between." He tightened a bolt, then wiped his hands on his jeans. "I take whatever work I can get." Emma's gaze flickered toward his beat-up truck parked near the barn, then toward the small car seat in the back. "You got a kid?" she asked. Jake glanced up, surprised. Most people didn't bother asking. "Yeah," he admitted. "Ethan, 5 years old, smart as a whip." Emma smiled. "Sounds like a good kid." Jake chuckled. "He is. Keeps me going." Silence settled between them. Then Emma asked something that caught him off guard. "And what keeps you going?" Jake froze. No one had ever asked him that. After a long pause, he exhaled. "Making sure my boy never struggles like I did." Emma studied him for a moment, then nodded. "That's a good answer." An hour later, Jake tightened the last bolt. "All right," he said, stepping back. "Moment of truth." Emma climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine roared to life. She let out a whistle, tapping the dashboard. "Well, I'll be damned." Jake smirked. "Told you I could fix it." Emma hopped down, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You saved me a whole lot of trouble, Sullivan." She pulled out her wallet and handed him a stack of cash. Jake took it, surprised. She was paying more than the flyer said. "That's too much," he said. Emma shook her head. "Not for someone who knows what they're doing." Jake chuckled. "Appreciate that." He turned to leave, but Emma called out, "Hold on a second." Jake turned back. Emma crossed her arms, tilting her head. "You said you take whatever work you can get, right?" "Yeah." Her lips curled into a small smile. "How do you feel about staying a little longer?" Jake frowned. "You got more tractors that need fixing." Emma chuckled. "I've got a lot more than tractors." She motioned toward the fields. Jake followed her gaze, and for the first time, he realized something. This wasn't just some small farm. This land stretched for miles. Emma didn't just own a farm. She owned one of the largest privately held agricultural operations in the country. Jake's stomach tightened. Who exactly was Emma Walker? And more importantly, what was she really offering him? Jake swallowed hard, staring at the endless fields stretching beyond the horizon. He turned back to Emma. "What exactly do you mean by staying longer?" Emma smirked, crossing her arms. "I mean, I need someone who can do more than just fix tractors." She gestured to the barn, the irrigation systems, the equipment lined up by the shed. "This place takes a beating year-round. I could use a guy who actually knows how to keep things running." Jake hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't know if I can commit to something long-term." Emma tilted her head. "Because of your son?" Jake nodded. "It's just the two of us. I can't be working 12-hour days if it means I'm barely home for him." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then, she motioned toward the old guest house tucked near the barn. That place has been empty for years. Needs some work, but if you fix it up, it's yours. Rent-free. Jake's chest tightened. You're offering me a place to live? Emma shrugged. You'd be close to work. And your kid? He'd have space to run, fresh air, animals to play with. A better life than being stuck in some apartment in town. Jake's breath hitched. That was exactly what he wanted for Ethan. But still, why are you doing this? Emma exhaled. Because I wasn't supposed to be here either. Jake frowned. What do you mean? She kicked at the dirt, a rare moment of vulnerability flashing across her face. I grew up thinking I'd leave this farm behind. Went to college, studied business, had big dreams about working in the city. She looked around. But when my dad passed, I realized this place is more than just land. It's home. It's a legacy. Her gaze locked onto his. And I need people I can trust to keep it running. Jake felt something shift inside him. For years, he had been searching for stability, for a place where he and Ethan could just breathe. And now this woman, a stranger just hours ago, was offering him exactly that. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. You sure about this? Emma smirked. I don't offer things I'm not sure about, Sullivan. Jake looked at the guest house, the open fields, the endless possibility. Then he thought about Ethan. A life outside the city. A fresh start. His fingers tightened around the cash in his hand. Finally, he looked back at Emma and grinned. All right, Walker, he said. Let's see if this farm can handle me. Emma chuckled. I think we'll manage. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake realized something. He hadn't just found a job. He had found a home. Sometimes the right opportunities don't come with a job listing. Sometimes they're hidden in places you never expected, waiting for you to take the first step. The next few weeks were the hardest work Jake had ever done. Fixing that old tractor had been just the beginning. From sunrise to sunset, he was repairing fences, restoring irrigation lines, maintaining the grain silos, and making sure the heavy machinery didn't break down in the middle of harvest. But unlike every other job before this, something was different. At the end of each day, instead of driving home to a cramped apartment, he walked across the field to the guest house, his new home. Instead of feeling drained, he felt fulfilled. And most importantly, Ethan was thriving. The little boy had turned into a farm kid overnight. He ran through the fields, played with the dogs, and even helped Emma feed the horses. One evening, as Jake finished repairing the old barn doors, Emma walked up beside him, hands in her pockets. You've been busy, she said, nodding toward the freshly reinforced wood. Jake wiped his hands on his jeans. Figured, if I'm staying, I might as well do the job right. Emma smirked. Starting to feel like home yet? Jake exhaled, glancing toward the fields where Ethan was laughing, chasing a rabbit near the fence. He smiled. Yeah, I think it does. Emma watched Ethan for a moment, then turned back to Jake. I knew you'd fit in here. Jake chuckled. That right? Emma shrugged. You're a builder, Sullivan. Doesn't matter if it's tractors, barns, or a new life. You know how to fix what's broken. Jake's smirk faded slightly. That hit deeper than he expected. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just working to survive. He was building something real, something lasting. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a job anymore. Maybe this farm wasn't just Emma's legacy. Maybe it was about to become his, too. Sometimes life doesn't take you where you planned. It takes you where you were meant to be all along. The weeks turned into months, and Jake no longer felt like just another worker on the farm. He was part of it now. The guest house was fully restored thanks to his late nights fixing the plumbing, patching the roof, and sanding down the old wooden floors. The once rusted farm equipment now ran smoother than ever. The fences were reinforced, the barns repainted, and the irrigation system, something that could have cost Emma thousands to replace, was running perfectly because Jake rebuilt it himself. And Ethan? Ethan was happier than Jake had ever seen him. He spent his days riding horses with Emma, naming every chicken on the farm and running through the fields like he had lived there forever. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma leaned against a fence post, watching Jake work on one of the pickup trucks. "You ever think about sticking around?" she asked casually. Jake wiped grease from his hands and raised an eyebrow. "What do you think I'm doing?" Emma smirked. "I mean, really sticking around." Jake hesitated, his hands gripping the rag a little tighter. He had never planned on staying anywhere permanently. Life had been too unstable for that. But now, he glanced toward the guest house, his home. He looked toward the field where Ethan was laughing, racing Emma's dog. And then he looked at Emma. Strong, independent, smart as hell. She had given him a chance when no one else had. And somewhere along the way, this farm, this land, this woman had started to feel like something more. Jake exhaled, tossing the rag onto the truck bed. "I guess that depends," he said, turning toward her. Emma raised an eyebrow. "On what?" Jake smirked. "On whether or not you're ready for a business partner." Emma blinked, caught off guard. "You serious?" Jake nodded. "You said it yourself. This farm is a legacy, and I don't just want to be a worker here, Emma. I want to help build something, grow this place, expand it." Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she grinned. "All right, Sullivan," she said, extending her hand. "Let's build something legendary." Jake shook her hand, grinning back. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just taking another job. He was taking a future. This was just the beginning. The best opportunities don't come from looking for them. Sometimes they come from choosing to stay exactly where you're meant to be.